One of the things that I really love about jazz chords, besides the fact that they just sound beautiful, is that you get to improvise with them and create your own sound on top of the song. But to do that, you need to have a few skills in place. So you need to get the chords, the rhythm, and the melody to work together. Let me show you how that works. Let's start with a basic set of chords that you can make a bit more interesting and then add some rhythm to. You probably already know these. I already added some color to these chords, so the D minor 7 has a 9th and the G7 has a 13th. For now, the C major 7 is just a basic C major 7 chord. These already sound great and you can use them to play lots of songs, but we need them to be a little bit more flexible, so let's throw away the bass notes. Now you have some more flexible chords to work with, so the rhythm is the next thing to focus on. Here's a solid riff that you can use. This demonstrates two important things about comping rhythms. First, repeating rhythms is a very strong concept. It connects to the groove and it's really comfortable for a soloist to play over. And actually, I think it's a little bit overlooked for people wanting to play jazz and feel free to improvise. But it sounds amazing to just sit in the groove with the rest of the rhythm section. And it also feels really nice. The second thing is that when you think about rhythm, then you want to think in longer periods, not just a single bar or an even shorter rhythm. So here it's a 4-bar statement that's laying down the groove and then making a variation before the next 4-bar period starts. Comping is really about thinking like a drummer and playing the form. And in fact, when you're comping, locking in with the drummer is one of the most important things that you need to do. With some chords and more ideas about rhythm, then you can add some melodies to the progression. And you can do that in a few different ways. First, you want to use the melody in the chords and then later add fills in between chords. Check out how this next example also uses another concept for the rhythm. Let's first look at the melodies. Here I'm using the melodies that are the easiest to add to the chord. Simply what I can reach on the top string, which in this case is the B string. So for the D minor 7 I have these. And for the G7 you actually have the same. And then for the C major 7 there are 2 notes. The point here is that it should be easy to play and you don't need a ton of different notes. In fact, being too busy will probably just mean getting in the way of the soloist. The structure of the rhythm in this example is a mix of call response and motivic development. So you have a call in the first bar, then a response, and then I repeat that call in bar 3 to add a different response to that. In that way, developing the motif. When you listen to rhythm, then try to think of it as melodies, because that's how you make that a strong part of your playing, especially when it comes to comping. Before I start adding extra chords, then let's try adding some fills, so just short melodies that are not played with the chords, but filling up in between them. There are 2 ways that you can use these. One is as a melody leading into or ending on a chord, or a short melody that just adds something else in between the chords. The fills here have different functions in the music. The first one is a scale run and really moving to the G7, where I'm now using a 2-note version of that G7 chord. The other is more used as a color or variation and is much more arpeggio based, since it then sort of takes the place of actually playing the chord. While fills often sound great, they very easily get in the way of the soloist, so you probably want to be a little bit careful with using them. I very often get the question, why do you write G7 and then play a G9 or a G13? And as you can see with the fills and the melodies, then the sound of the chord changes. Sometimes there's a 9th, sometimes there isn't, so it doesn't really make too much sense to write extensions in the sheet music, unless you want to force the one playing the chords to use a specific sound. That's also why you mostly stick with symbols that just show you the basic version of the chord, and then the rest is up to the taste and the skills of the one playing the chords. Let's look at a few ways that you can change chords and add some extra chords to create a bit more movement. A great way to keep the chord progression moving is to add some chords that have more tension and really pull towards a resolution, so really drive the progression forward. The next example uses 2 ways of doing that. You can add a chromatic passing chord. Now there are somewhat complicated theoretical explanations for this, but really it's just about looking at where you want to go and then take a chord that you can slide into that chord. So if you want to go to this G7, then you can come from above like this. Or you can slide up to the C major 7 using this chord. And as you can see, I'm really just using the same shape and then moving up or down a half step or sliding a fret. Notice that I don't put a name on these chords, and that's because that's not that important. They're just chords that you use to get to the main chord. The other way that you can create tension is by altering dominants, which make them have more drive towards the resolution. Something like this. And an example with chromatic passing chords and altered dominants sounds like this. You can actually think about alterations on dominant chords in two different ways. In this example, you see a G7 flat 13 on beat 4 of the second bar, and here I'm using the alteration as a way to play a chromatic leading note before resolving to the C major 7. When you do this, then it doesn't really influence the soloist to use a specific scale or force a different sound on the entire dominant. It's really just a chromatic passing note. That's one way to think of alterations. The other one would be to use an altered dominant. So really play that for the entire bar and change the sound. And usually that will also mean that the soloist should probably play a scale that fits with that sound. That's something like this. Until now, it's been about chords and the top note melody, but there is actually another secret weapon, a beautiful way to add movement inside your jazz chords, inner voice movement. Instead of having the top note melody move, it can be nice to have simple melodies move inside the chord, like this way of going from D minor 7 to G7 with a chromatic enclosure inside the D minor 7 voicing. And this also works incredibly well for static C major 7 chords that otherwise can be a little bit boring. In context, that sounds like this. There are many ways to start working on jazz chords, but one of the best ways to start that you can also use to cover a lot of grooves like bossa nova and chords and walking bass is to start with shell voicings. These are very important to have in your vocabulary, and you can check out how to use them and learn some songs in this video.